Hi, I'm Dick Sutphen, and I'm glad you joined me today. And we're going to be talking about a lot of metaphysical things. And I'm going to talk a little about my latest book, which is Soul Agreements. And I wrote it with my wife, Tara. And the premise of the book is that we're going to hypnotize clients that have real problems. And Tara, in the meantime, is sitting right with me, and she is connecting her chakras to my client's chakras. And through this chakra link, she is creating a very high level of psychic attunement. In other words, she's going to know what my client is going to say, probably before the client says it. And so it is a matter of, by combining our techniques, we are really looking at what this person came in to try to accomplish in this life. In other words, what were their soul agreements? So that's the basic premise of the book. And we tell many chapters, many stories, in which we do this joint investigation. Now, as part of the investigation, we did follow-up, we explored all aspects of the person's life. And what we found was, I was looking for destiny. I was looking for, to what degree is destiny a part of your life? In other words, how much of your life was predestined? All right, well now the premise of the book, the real reason that I wrote it, was to investigate predestination. In other words, to what degree is your life predestined? To what degree is my life predestined? And so we decided we needed a lot of different types of cases. And we worked on this for probably the better part of 3 years. And the way we found the answers was through the regression. We found out what the client had experienced in a past life. In other words, what was the life, where was the problem today relating back to the past life? Now, Tara is doing automatic writing at the same time she's psychically linked to the client. And so we now have the automatic writing, we have the regression, then she would take the information, the astrological information about the client home, and she would do a complete chart on the individual. And this will take her at least 3 hours just to basically get it set up. And she investigates with Western astrology and a Chaldean, a form of Chaldean astrology. And so when we combined all this information, we found that the client was living the life, quite literally, that they had set up to want to experience this time around, because the astrology and the automatic writing and the regression all just fit together like a hand into a glove. So we saw the degree of destiny at play with each case history that we did. And they were different types of case history. The people were coming from a total different place. And yet, people seem to destine their lives ahead of time. And of course, some of them didn't destine it real tightly. Others did. In other words, they're experiencing almost everything the way they set it up. But you can do this. You can do it too. If you have your astrology chart read by someone who's really good, especially somebody who combines Eastern and Western astrology, and you look at your past lives, you can understand what you are doing here, why you're here, and what you have to accomplish while you're here. I've been asked to tell you about a case. It's really a case of Tara's. A situation that came up just a very short time ago. And it involves a young girl who was killed. She was hit by a car on Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, only 13 years old. And some of the conditions are a little suspicious, but the fact is the girl died. Now Tara, and I should have her telling this story because it's her story, but I think I understand it pretty well. In this case, now Tara has a teen class where any teen in Malibu is invited to come to the house if they want to on the night that they're doing the class. And so she's trained a lot of the kids around Malibu to be very good psychics. And they still gather on the given time, and they have a really interesting evening. I sit into it sometimes. I'll run an occasional process, but Tara's been doing this for years. Well, now when the kids all heard that this 13-year-old girl who had died on the Pacific Coast Highway, just walking along the edge of the highway, all the kids came to Tara because they know she works with the dead. And they said, Tara, you've got to go out. You've got to help her. And our daughter Cheyenne said the same thing. She went and said, Mom, you've got to go out and help her. And so Tara did. She went into deep trance, and she went out and she found the girl at the scene of the accident. And she had not really reoriented to the world yet. She was not over the shock of dying, and in such a horrible way. And so Tara helped her up. I mean, she was probably carried away by the ambulance by that time, but in her mind, she was still there. And Tara helped her up and talked to her and said, you've crossed over, it's okay. And the girl had questions, and Tara was trying to make her feel comfortable, and she said, what would you like? What would you really like to have at this time? How can I help you? And the girl wanted her mommy, of course. She wanted her mommy, and she wanted a teddy bear. And so on the other side, basically, thoughts are things. And so Tara, with the girl, manifested the teddy bear. And everything about this teddy bear was verified later by the parents after the fact. And it was one of her very favorite possessions, and she then envisioned that she was holding the teddy bear. And Tara told her, because she wanted to go home. She wanted to see her mommy and go home. And so Tara helped her with that, but she explained to her that her mama was not going to be able to respond to her. In other words, she wouldn't know she's there. Now, the young girl would see her mom, but the mom could not see her. And so she coached her on this quite a little while. And the girl wanted to know, well, how can I talk to my mama? How can I communicate? Was beginning, I guess, to really panic. And Tara said, well, I can teach you how to let them know that you're there. I can teach you how to rattle pots or pans. I imagine throw a switch, turning the lights on and off. Some basic, what you think of as poltergeist activity. And so the girl listened very closely. And evidently, this is what she did. She went home, and Tara told her this wouldn't be the real house, but it will feel like the real house. And then your mom, you'll be there. You'll be able to see your mom. And so the girl did it. And the next morning, this all happened late in the afternoon into the evening. And the next morning, Tara was up getting a morning cup of tea, and she said the pots and pans beneath the stove began to rattle. And she knew that the young girl was with her. She learned very quickly. So Tara was then helping her across. The girl wanted to remain for the funeral and the basic, activities that normally take place after a funeral. And she stayed, and she asked Tara, because Tara had given her a time. She says, I'll help you over in 24 hours. I'll help you make the jump, the final jump, to the other side, into the light, basically, so to speak, the way I'm assuming it was. And the girl asked for another 24 hours. She said, can I stay 48 hours? I still haven't gotten in touch with all my friends. I want to say goodbye, even though they don't see me. And so Tara gave her that time. Now the young girl was Jewish. And Tara said when the 48 hours were up, that she went out of body, Tara goes out of body, into the other side. And she walked the girl down a path that she normally uses to help people to cross. And she said she'd never seen this before, but when she came to the point where she can't go any further, and basically they are starting to cross over into the light, she said 2 Orthodox Jewish men came down the road and took her hands and led her off into the light. So I get goosebumps up and down my arms as I tell you that story. And I wish it was Tara who could tell it, but it's a potent story, and it's the type of after-death work that she does all the time. She has become known around Malibu in particular for helping young kids. There's been a couple of suicides recently, and she's helped them to cross over. A young girl that hung herself, a young man that died under suspicious circumstances, and another one who died in Las Vegas. He and his friends from Malibu had gone up to Las Vegas, and he went over a balcony, and the friends panicked when they saw what had happened because he died on the spot, and the friends ran away. And so Tara talked to the young man that has just died, and he told her how he really died, and that was later authenticated by the Las Vegas police. It was on a surveillance camera at the hotel, and these 4 friends were seen running out of the hotel, and they left. So she's doing a lot of this kind of work with the young kids that she has such a rapport with. And I hope one day she can come on this program and she can tell you all about these things all on her own. All right, I'm Dick Sutphen, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my background, how I started. I have a lot of years doing the work that I'm doing. But my background is I'm an advertising designer. And I had other designers working for me. And one of them said, I want to take a self-hypnosis class. And that sounded kind of interesting, but what really intrigued me was the fact that if you took this class with a man named Don Weldon, and this was in Phoenix, Arizona, if you took his class 6 weeks, then he would regress you into a past life at the end of that time. And now that was fascinating to me. And so I did. I took the hypnosis class, and it was a lot of fun, and I learned techniques that I'm still using today. In other words, I learned how to do self-hypnosis. I programmed myself. If I do this and close my eyes, I go down into a deep hypnotic sleep. And so I used it to get over, if I have a headache, if I remember being out on a boat and I was getting seasick, and I used the technique, told myself I was feeling fine, I was feeling just great, came back up, and I was feeling good. But what was important on this class on the regression was I went back to a place called Copan, Honduras, to a Mayan lifetime. And I saw a lot of things during that regression. It was very emotional. And I actually saw my own death in the regression. And I had a lot of, Don had to wake me up several times because I was so upset about the fact that I was stabbed in the back. And I remember getting home and my wife said, "Really, right there?" And she said, "Well, you have a birthmark, a little thin birthmark on your back, right in that spot." And I'd forgotten anything like that. If I ever knew it existed, but I forgot it. But I was so intrigued with the idea of Copan, Honduras, I'd never heard of it, that I went to the Phoenix Library and I investigated. Now, I had seen many things that, well, as an example, I was a young boy and I came running out of the jungle and I saw this big temple-like building and the sun was setting and it was reflecting on the face of that building. And I assumed, well, the building probably was facing west. And I had a lot of details like that that I could use to seemingly verify. And I went to the library, and this main temple building was indeed facing west. And I went through all the other details, and they were all accurate. And there were a lot of historic details and timing that I was able to verify as well. So now I was really intrigued. And I think probably some of the first investigation that I did was try to prove it all wrong, because this was messing with my belief system, this idea of living past lives, coming back again and again and again, and having the kind of adventures where somebody kills you and you come back and you still have a birthmark, and you find that a lot of what you believe today dates back to that lifetime. So it was a lot to deal with in my mind at that time. And Phoenix was a hotbed of New Age activity. Now, this was in the 70s, and I think there were already 400 New Age churches or organizations in Phoenix. But Don was the only, to the best of my knowledge at that time, he was the only past life regressionist. So I took more training, and I began to do it myself. I began to actually work with other people, and at first just one or two, and then I decided, well, I'm going to work with several people at one time. And so I could fit 22 people in my living room in Scottsdale, Arizona. And so I did, and I started doing all these group regressions. Well, nobody had done that before. I was to find out later. When I told Don about it, he said, "Oh my God, don't do that. You're going to get in terrible trouble." But I explained, I'm doing it, and I'm doing it very successfully, and I haven't had any trouble yet. But it was a marvelous time of investigation, of trying to find out if somebody could speak a foreign language. And then I found people that automatically, they spoke to me, in one case, in Dutch. And I had to say after the fact, why, I need you to speak up in English. And the woman was able to do that. But we took that Dutch, because we'd recorded all the sessions, and took the Dutch that she was speaking to a language professor in Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. And the professor said, "Well, yeah, it's really Dutch, but where did you ever find someone that could speak? This is an ancient dialect almost." Not ancient, but it was old. It was really an old Dutch dialect. And so they verified another thing. One after another, we were getting these verifications. And I was becoming more and more and more intrigued. And so, although I had the advertising design business, that was how I made my living at the time, there was a spare office built in the office that we had, the design studio. In the back, it wasn't being used, and it was big. And so I decided to open a hypnosis center. And I started to hypnotize people that came in. If they wanted a hypnotic regression, I would take them there. And we experienced just one after another adventures, experiments. I was trying to learn everything there was to learn about hypnotherapy, about the potentials, and now this was a very long time ago in the 70s. I'm still doing that. I am still trying to figure out how to do everything, how to do it better, how to do it faster, and I'm experimenting with new ideas. But at the time, I was getting amazing case histories. And so I started, they were all recorded, and so I could go back to those recordings and transcribe them, and I started to have the makings, I realized, of a good book. And that book was published by Simon & Schuster Pocketbooks, and it was called You Were Born Again to Be Together. And the book went on to sell 1 million copies, over 1 million copies. So it was a very popular book when it came out, and that was in 1976. And I've written a lot of books since. I continue to write them. I've created about 400 hypnosis CDs that explore every possible aspect of the metaphysical world, but they also help people to lose weight and stop smoking and everything along that line. That's the clinical hypnosis approach. And today I'm a hypnotherapist, and I have an office in Westlake Village, California, and I have a nice clientele, and I do seminars. And the seminars are very much like the one I've done in Pipestem, West Virginia. So if you're listening to this series, if you're seeing the different shows that have been created, why, you've seen some of that as well. So that is my story in a thimble. Very, very capsulized, but that's how I came to be doing what I'm doing today. Okay, I'm doing hypnotherapy, but I'm using spiritual techniques to find the answers. And so that usually confuses people a little bit. They say, well, what? And so I'm going to tell you just a few stories, a few examples of how in finding the cause of your current problem in the past, you can release the effect, you can let go of it in the present. And as one of my favorite examples, a man who was a workaholic, who was just absolutely working night and day. And if his child was having a birthday, well, he could hardly come home and stay long enough to eat a piece of birthday cake, and he'd have to go right back to the office and work. He's just total workaholic. And it was hurting his marriage. And so he went to a regressive hypnotist, and the hypnotist took him back to the cause. Now, the cause that he foresaw, or she saw in regression, was he was burying his child because the child starved to death. Literally starved to death. And as a parent, can you imagine what a horrible experience that would be? You cannot feed your child and she dies. And so, the cause and effect of a situation like this, he never, ever wanted to experience that type of pain again. He never wanted to have to go through it. So, in his mind, making money equals having food. Because this probably took place at the time of the Irish famine, and the poor people were not eating. The rich people continued to eat. There was not really a famine to begin with. So, I would imagine that he never again wanted to experience that kind of pain. And so he was working himself to death to avoid it. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I hope you'll be back when we're going to be doing future shows. So until next time, goodbye.